everyone. Thanks for joining us again. If by chance this is your first time popping on, I'm Tammy Price, and we are certified medical intuitives working with shifting into high gear. Medical intuitives make up one part of your whole health team. So we're excited to be here.
Hey guys, I am Lindsay Bil. I am the other part of shifting into high gear and also a certified medical intuitive. And this morning we want to dive in and talk about a concept of two patients and one doctor and how you can support your own healing journey. And Tammy wrote a really amazing article that went out to our mailing list about a week ago. And it's something that's really important that I think we should be diving into and elaborating on kind of on a deeper level as we are surrounded by health issues at this point in time, and what we can do to empower ourselves and how we take responsibility and accountability for our own healing journeys.
Yeah, so let's give a little bit of a synopsis of like the kind of theory. So, you know, and we've witnessed this. This is something that Lindsay and I have experienced in working with folks. So you've got one doctor, and we're not purporting to be doctors here. There are professional medical doctors. But okay, let's put it this way. You've got one healthcare practitioner. Fair enough, Linz? You've got one healthcare practitioner and you've got two patients, similar diagnoses, both seeing this healthcare practitioner. And the healthcare practitioner writes out a prescription for each of them. And the prescription is full of, you know, we're imagining it's the doctor of the future, right? And it's full of things that are unconventional. Right? Because when we're giving recommendations to someone as a way to empower them into self-healing, they might be things like finger painting, where you're dipping your fingers into cold, wet paint and connecting to the sensations that rise up inside of your body, and then taking your fingers and sliding them over the paper. And the purpose of that, for example, would be to awaken the sensations in the physical body so that you can begin to learn to attune to those sensations, because those sensations are one part of our whole self, right? And so you've got these two patients, they've both been given their prescriptions. Again, it's the doctor of the future. They've been given some unconventional methods as a way to empower themselves into healing. And you get patient one, and patient one follows through with everything on the list. And I think like the way that I described it in the article was, hey, you know, patient one, you know, reached out to its local cryotherapy clinic and set up a schedule for themselves to go 5 days a week, every morning at 7 o'clock in the morning. They booked their quarterly float deprivation tank experience. You know, they walked down to Walmart and spent $6 and they bought the finger paints. And I can't remember what the other stuff was, but it was similar to that. So this patient was all in, right? Like all in, dove in, followed the recommendations, letter of the law. Then you've got patient two, Aylins.
We love patient two.
We do love patient two. Literally, we do love patient two. You know, and that's a really fair statement, because I think you can get to the place where you can go, oh, number two doesn't follow the recommendations, so we don't like number two as much. No, that's not true. We love number two just as much as we love number one. The problem is that we're working towards getting someone to help them heal, right? We're looking to heal the physical body. And so patient number two looks at the list, looks at the prescription list and goes, no way. There's no way I'm doing cryotherapy. Too damn cold. Float deprivation tank, that's expensive and it's far away and I'm not sure I'm willing to commit. Maybe I'd be willing to try it. Finger paints, child's play, not doing that, you know, like, so they're immediately starting to cross things off the list and eliminate, and then picking and choosing the things that they are going to follow. So a couple of weeks later, you've got patient two, totally dive in. The healing process has already begun. They're starting to resume normal life activities, really grateful towards the doctor, just super excited. And in fact, ready to recommend friends and clients, friends and family to the doctor. Then you've got patient two, which is starting to get frustrated with the process, not healing, not getting better, making further appointments with the doctors, not showing up for the further appointments for the doctors, not following through with the prescription, calling up friends. This is the best part. And this is the part that like, I think probably activates me the most, is that calling up friends and saying, I can't believe, like, I'm not getting better. I'm not getting better. I'm not getting better. It's all this doctor's fault and blah, 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 blah. And so now this whole story is starting to get fueled, which of course is manifesting into further discomfort in the physical body. So there you have it. One patient follows the directions, lives out his opportunity to heal himself or herself or themselves. And then you have patient 2 that doesn't heal, right?
And so it's so interesting because like even as you're describing these two scenarios, as medical intuitives, we've been taught to attune to our sensations that rise up in the body and how we respond to things that we're hearing and seeing and facing in our external world. And so even as you're saying this, like the expansion that I feel within myself as you talk about patient 1 is huge. Like it's limitless. You can tell that we've tapped into parts of that parasympathetic nervous system that really empower us to believe that healing is possible. And when you're talking about patient number 2, I feel myself close off. Like I feel myself go into protection mode and into this state of just limits and disbelief and disempowerment. And so even, attuning to how I feel as you're telling this story, you can see why patient 1 would have more opportunity available to them or see more results coming back to them versus patient 2, where it's like they've almost cut off their own opportunities and they've cut the vastness down that they're able to tap into. And it's so interesting because we are in this time right now where, we're trying to find integrative health measures. And like you said, when we did the introduction, a medical intuitive is part of your whole health team. And so when you are working with practitioners, you want somebody who's going to give you conventional methods and ways to support your system on an external level. But you also want somebody who's going to give you those unconventional methods of healing, where it's like awakening those other aspects of yourselves. As a medical intuitive, we really focus on these 3 parts of ourselves, which are the mind, the body, and the soul. And a lot of times what happens when we're working with clients, for the majority of them, they are mind-based functioners. And so what we focus on a lot of the time is activating those other parts of ourselves that have been eclipsed by the mind. And so how can we introduce play, and how can we introduce sensory experiences that are going to activate our body to stimulate itself in different ways than what we've given it permission to before? And so by, focusing on patient number 1, they gave themselves permission to heal by choosing to make that appointment and do that recommendation and feel silly and weird and sit in the discomfort of having paint all over their hands as they just make a mess on this paper with their finger paints. Whereas patient number 2 really resided within that box of constructs that we've had and has really limited themselves, where they're not giving themselves permission to heal. As medical intuitives, we talk about tapping into subliminal space and how much potential resides between healthy and unhealthy, or functioning and dysfunctioning. And so when we activate ourselves in these other areas, and when we take these unconventional methods and use those as ways to heal, what we're doing is allowing ourselves to tap into that potential and to tap into this parasympathetic nervous system where health and healing truly resides. And when you look at that second patient, they have just limited themselves. It's like they came up to a fork in the road, and rather than being able to choose one way or the other, they just stay in that fork in the road and just kind of throw their hands up in the air and say, I don't know where I'm going to go, so I'm just going to sit here and not do anything. And that's really what we want to avoid when it comes to working with our clients. We want to continue to activate them and encourage them and get them excited about what's possible within their own health and healing journeys.
Totally. It's like the whole idea that energy flows when you give it the space to flow, right? If you continually shut it down by using the mind-based functioning, which speaks the language of interpretation, and here you've got the patient number 2 who is highly engaged in his mind-based functioning, and his mind-based functioning is the part that's saying, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. And every time he or she says, or they say, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, what's happening is they are shrinking the space and not allowing the energy, the expansiveness, for that energy to be able to flow, right? And so, it really comes down to, and we hear life coaches talking about this all the time, right? Like this whole idea of limitless capability, limitless potential, right? And they talk about it because it's a real thing. The real thing. What people don't talk about, or what they don't understand, is the science behind why that limitless potential is so important, right? Like why tapping into that opportunity for limitless space is so important, because it's more than just you setting out and doing something that you haven't done before. I mean, it's certainly about that, but when you take that right back to the root, what am I trying to create by tapping into that limitless potential? What is the physiological impact that's taking place while I'm tapping into that limitless potential, right?
Yeah.
And the reality is you are creating space for the energy to flow.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting because we know that inflammation is one of the leading causes of disease and dysfunction within the body. If you have inflammation for an extended period of time, it's pretty much inevitable that disease or dysfunction or ailments are going to happen within the body. Inflammation becomes present when our body becomes too acidic. And how does our body become acidic? Well, it's because we have resided in the sympathetic nervous system for so long. It's like when you're young and you are faced with abandonment and rejection or some sort of trauma. If we don't have the capability or the cognitive ability to really decipher that experience or work through that experience from a healthy mindset, which is everything in the world is working out for me, not everything in the world is happening to me or working against me. When we are able to operate from that space of everything's working out for me, we create a more alkaline system for ourselves. We bring the body back into balance. But what happens is life happens, bills are happening, pandemics are happening, job losses are happening, relationship losses are happening, all of those things. And so we are going through this world in a very sympathetic nervous system manner. We are thinking that everything's a threat. We're constantly protecting ourselves. We're constantly gauging our surroundings as far as what's coming for me, what's going to attack me, what do I need to be careful of or fearful of. And that automatically, without any conscious effort from us, creates acidity within our system, which is then going to manifest into inflammation, which is then going to manifest into disease and dysfunction. And so by taking these unconventional methods of healing, what we're doing is allowing our view of the world to change, where we can actually go and get excited about the conflicts that come up or the conflicts that arise. We can get excited about those and say, what is this trying to teach me? What is this trying to help me learn or understand? How is this trying to help me evolve? And so even shifting that perspective, if you're in attunement with your sensations of yourself, you can feel yourself kind of settle into parasympathetic a little bit more. And the more that we are able to activate that or engage that parasympathetic nervous system, we allow our body's acidity levels, our pH balance, to come back into regulation, which really does put us back into that space of limitless potential, where now all of a sudden we are looking at things not from a threat perspective, but from an opportunistic perspective. And now all of a sudden, everything that we view the world through internally and externally is no longer in this state of fight or flight, but really in this state of rest and digest, which is where healing occurs and where our immunity becomes its strongest.
That's so good, Linz.
Yeah.
So here's a question for you, and I don't know that we've ever talked about this before. We talk a lot about the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Is there a place for the sympathetic nervous system?
Totally. Yeah, I think it's necessary for us. It's one of those things, our bodies are so intelligent. And without that fight or flight response, we would just walk into threats without even thinking about it. that's definitely a big aspect of us. And, bringing it back down to the three parts of ourselves, the mind is still such an important aspect of us. And when in balance, it operates 33.3% of our being. And so to say that that's not required anymore, or that's not necessary anymore, or to walk through the world and not have a gauge for threat, well, then we don't have any discernment about what our life is. And so I definitely think that it plays a role. It's just understanding how can we train it to be more supportive of our overall well-being rather than unsupportive of our well-being.
Yeah.
What's your
So
takes on that?
yeah, and so I agree. Like, I look at it from the mind, body, and soul, and I recognize that the mind is 33%, 33.333% of who we are. It has to play a role, but the way it is right now, it's playing a dominating role for most of us walking out on the sidewalks out there. It's playing that dominating role, and it's like, we talk about this a lot, like everything in balance,
Mm,
right? Everything in moderation. And it's no different when it comes to that, right? Like everything in moderation. The mind will always be there. It'll always play a role. I just don't want it to play as much of a role as it has for my entire life. Because when it has played a role in the way that it has for most, if not all of my life, it's been like, it's created opportunity for me to take action that wasn't necessarily supportive of my whole being, right? Which I think is probably, in large part why I was diagnosed with cancer, right? So, taking it back to that, it's like to me again, it's like just like you said, it's such an adventure when you can wake up in the morning and go, how am I going to activate my soul today?
mm,
Or when you wake up in the morning and your soul is already activated and you've had to do nothing, and the sole reason why it's now activated is because you've allowed it the space, the expansive space, the limitless potential for it to feel comfortable to be able to activate itself, right? Same with
mm.
the bodily sensations. You start out attuning to them. You started attuning to them, but then at some point they get to the place where they're so confident. They know that you're going to listen to them when they speak. And so then it just speaks on its own. You're like, oh, there you are. Thank you. Thank
Totally.
you.
Yeah, I know, like one of the things you often say is like it starts with just like a tickle. Like all you have to do is like tickle these other aspects of yourself to remember like how good it feels to activate those parts of ourselves. And when you're dealing with someone who has chronic illness or chronic pain, they're facing a life-threatening disease. One of the first questions that I ask is like, if you could wake up tomorrow like happy and healthy and free of this, what would your life look like? What would you do? What would the steps that, and so many people have a hard time answering that because they have spent so long facing their symptoms or battling their symptoms that they don't even know how it would feel to be on the other side of that. And
Mm.
so much like we say, like when somebody's depressed and you just like ask them to like pull up their socks and just go and do it, it's not going to work. It's going to fail every single time because they're not ready to take that leap. So when we're dealing with someone who has chronic pain, chronic illness, facing a life-threatening disease, sometimes all it takes is these really small, intentional recommendations like finger painting, biting into a lemon, doing cryotherapy, getting in a sensory deprivation tank and reminding the body what it feels like to be weightless and limitless. And these are all ways of just tickling those other aspects of ourselves so that people can get excited. And just even if it's for 5 minutes or a brief second, that they are able to feel balance within their system, that they are able to feel their mind, their body, and their soul operating equally and optimally. Sometimes that's all it takes to kick healing into the driver's seat and really like activating and taking intentional action. And so the other question is like, when it comes to these two patients and one doctor, it's the same thing of like, how willing are you to take responsibility and take accountability? Are you willing to go into a cabin in the woods and go into solitude and spend your time there completely alone and focusing on your healing? Like, how important is it to you? And what are you willing to change in your life to feel your best and be your best and thrive and actually come out and heal from this?
Mhm.
Um,
There's no empathetic way to say this. There's no empathetic way to say this, but it's like people use often what I witness, and you probably the same thing, Linz, is like people use their illness as a security blanket, right? Like they attach themselves in it onto it. It gives them meaning, it gives them purpose, it gives them validation, because for a long time people didn't see or hear them, and now they're seeing and hearing them because they have no choice to, because this person is ill, right? And so,
mhm.
like I said, there's really no sympathetic or empathetic way to share that. But it is a reality, right? I mean, we witnessed it in the story of the one doctor, two patients, right? And it, because you've got the one patient who's like, I'm ready to kick this illness to the curb. I'm ready to do whatever it takes to kick this illness to the curb. And then you've got the second one who's like, I don't like that. I don't like this. I don't like that. And you witness it right there. One one of them is, patient number two is using their illness as a security blanket, like
Mhm.
holding on to it for dear life, and then calling friends and enrolling other folks into the story of not healing. And people don't even know they're being enrolled when they are being enrolled. That's a topic for another video, I think. But it's like, yeah, like there's no sympathetic way of saying that. It's just, this is what people do, right?
Mhm. Totally. Yeah. And so I feel like this is such an important like message to share with people, because we are in this space where um, people are looking for alternative methods to healing outside of our traditional like medical systems. Um, and really taking ownership and recognizing like, what can I do to empower my own healing, whether I am already in that space of chronic illness, chronic disease, or having ailments and symptoms, or if I'm just looking for a preventative method and a preventative way to keep my body healthy and make my system a space that's not optimal for disease and dysfunction to enter in. And I think like at any stage, wherever you are on this journey, whatever step you're taking at this point in time, remembering that it all comes back to like you taking accountability for yourself and responsibility for your healing journey, recognizing that little steps that are very intentional in activating the parts of us that have been eclipsed create tremendous strides as far as like the energy of the body flows and like how our optimal interconnectivity works. No matter what stage you're at, like there are things that you can do to help create and maintain balance within your system. And a lot of it begins with recognizing like when we are triggered, recognizing when we have gone into that sympathetic nervous system, into that fight or flight mode, and being able to take corrective intentional action and regulate our systems. And we've given, a few options between like finger painting and biting into lemons and hot and cold therapy and sensory deprivation tanks and all of those types of things, but really getting creative with it, whether it's like standing outside in the snow or putting your feet on gravel or in wet grass. There's so many different ways to activate those parts of ourselves that really bring our healing to our doorstep. And all we have to do is kind of make that conscious choice of, this is the path that I want to take, and I'm all in on that path. No matter what I'm facing and no matter what I'm going through, it's about taking that really intentional action and recognizing that we have the power within us to create an optimal environment for our bodies to heal.
Mhm. It's like kind of like the whole idea of being proactive versus reactive. In reactive, what you're doing is you're putting out, every time somebody asks you for something, you're being reactive to it, right? Like you're just putting it out. Proactive means great love resides here, and I get to make the decisions with what I'm going to do with my time, right? And so, anytime you bring that great love back to self, you create that optimal environment for the body to heal.
Love that.
Patient number one wasn't reactive. Patient number one was proactive. I've got this list of things to do. I'm going to make it all happen and I'm going to do it. Patient number two was like, yeah, yeah. And then still like symptoms are rising up and back to the doctor. And the doctor's like, I've given you the prescription. Like, what are you doing? Right.
Mhm.
And yeah, so big difference there.
Yeah, I love it.
Well, thanks for sharing. This has been great. This is a great conversation. We're going to put the link to our, if you want to be added to our newsletter when we do send out these kinds of things, we'll put the link below. And of course, like keep watching because we're going to have some good stuff coming up.
Yeah, and like if you feel compelled, share your stories in the comments. If you have ways that you have intentionally taken action in support of yourself, put it in the comments below and let other people try out your techniques, and stay engaged, stay interactive, and stay intentional.
And stay healthy. Yeah.
And stay healthy.